Good morning.
Hey, happy Tuesday, everybody. We're so glad that you are joining us here at Rural Community Solutions, where we help you design family-friendly, youth-centered places that thrive. My name is Kim Spillers.
And I'm Frank Spillers, and we help create environments that attract people to your community, to your business, because you want to attract the type of people that you want. You don't want to attract, you want to attract the type of people that you want. So that takes a specific intention to create the environment that people want. And given this day and age of how people are moving around and where they're going in their communities, and so it takes an intentional act for communities to create that environment that will attract that person that chooses to live in your community, rather than they come with a job. Boy, this opening was a little smoother in my head than it was right now, but you kind of get that. So today we're going to be talking to the executive director of Southwest Iowa's Golden Hills Resource Conservation and Development. And I'm just out of here. So here, enjoy this. We'll be right back. Picture, if you will, the pure, raw prairie. No wires, no fences, no roads, not even a farmhouse. No sign of civilization. This is what a person saw that was crossing the prairie in a wagon more than 170 years ago. They jumped off the wagon, looked around, and declared, "This is where I want to settle and build a town. A great place to live and a great place to raise my family." So they took a risk. They built a house made out of the land, planted food to eat, and cared for the land. Then they wrote back to their friends where they came from and described the great opportunity and promise that they have found. They invited who they knew to join them in their discovery, people they had a relationship with, and so they came, family by family, and those families invited others they knew who they wanted to live with within that community. The communities grew because the needs of the families grew, so entrepreneurs started businesses to meet those community needs. Ice houses, broom factories, general stores, and many other types of sole proprietor entrepreneurial businesses started up within the community. All of our communities across this country, all around the world, were started in this way, with a vision of the future and a plan to grow with people. Yay. And as we do grow, we need help from organizations, agencies, and people that have a passion for rural America.
So this morning, continuing our celebration of Women's History Month, we are so excited that Michelle Wodtke Franks is joining us. She's right here in the flesh in her office in Oakland, Iowa, which is in southwest Iowa. She is the executive director of the Golden Hills RC&D. Yesterday, we said, if you want to know what that is, come back. So today it is Golden Hills Resource Conservation and Development is what RC&D stands for. So Michelle, welcome. And gosh, we're just so glad to have you. Thank you.
Well, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you.
Well, you have such a wonderful history. You've been in nonprofits for about 30 years. You like to help local people dream big and put those ideas into action. And so we have several stories that we want to make sure that we include. But why don't we start off with, let's say that we have listeners, viewers who are from metro areas. They have no idea what an RC&D is or does. Can you start there and just share a little bit about that, please?
Sure. RC&Ds were actually organized nationally in the United States out of the 1962 Farm Bill. So they've been around for a long time. And at one point, there were RC&Ds peppered all throughout rural areas throughout the United States. In Iowa, at one point, I think we had 15 RC&Ds. So the entire state was divided up into different RC&D regions. Our area was formed in 1981 and really coincided with the farm crisis that was happening in the 1970s and 1980s, where a lot of the small family farms were, struggling. And we were starting to make the transition to, larger farm operations away from the small family farm, which I have this probably hints at my age, recollection of having grandparents that had a fully multifaceted farm operation, diversified farming. So for Golden Hills, we were formed through a council made up of local people that lived in Southwest Iowa. And our initial footprint included the 8 counties of Southwest Iowa. And our objective was to help local people identify resources, needs, opportunities to address issues of natural resource conservation, of economic development opportunities, and to enhance quality of life in our rural communities, unique to our area, because rural places are different, and for good and for bad. And so it's really based on the idea that local people are the best decision makers for their future. And we have continued that tradition for 40 years. And RC&Ds were federally funded through the USDA until 2011, and that money went away. And enter me in 2014 with Golden Hills to kind of figure out, where are we going to go in the future? What are we going to look like? How do we honor sort of our original intent for being organized? And how do we make sure that we're relevant to people and our neighbors that live in Southwest Iowa? So here we are.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, because the RC&Ds, and then we had the rural development councils on top of that. They were both funded through USDA, and given some of their, now the rural development councils were funded just a little bit. Well, maybe along the same lines, as they paid for staff, and then the organization raised money for the projects and did other things like that. So they're both 501c3s. And that, the government in infinite wisdom decided that, well, we're not going to fund things that work anymore. And so let's kind of throw this out the window. But your the Iowa Rural Development Council and your RC&D both survived. Why? What was that with the RC&D? And you have the citizen board, you have the local people on the board. What was the passion for continuing and seeing the value of the RC&D to survive?
Well, I think there's about 5 RC&Ds left in the state of Iowa, and I would say probably 4 of them have multiple staff, are still continuing to do work comparable to what our original intention was. But really, in Western Iowa, we're the last woman standing in Western Iowa for RC&Ds, and so I think the reason for our success is we really took a hard look at what sets us apart. And we don't want to duplicate services, because we have terrific ISU extension councils. We have our councils of government. We have a number of organizations that are doing similar work that we don't want to duplicate that. We want to enhance it. And so what we've landed on, and I think the reason for our success, is that we truly embrace collaboration. And we have adopted collective impact as our sort of organizational strategy, where we don't believe that we can do anything by ourselves, and we're stronger together. And we do a pretty good job of adapting and changing to some of the changing concerns. And so I think that's probably the biggest reason why we're still here, is that we have given ourselves permission to be adaptable and to figure out how we can be a Swiss Army knife and fill in those spaces and bring people together to address concerns around conservation, development, quality of life initiatives. I will also say that we've had an incredible legacy of board members who made some really good financial decisions and were able to establish, some reserve funding to carry us through those dark times, like last year. And also, we have the great fortune of owning the building that we're in, so we don't have to pay rent, and we're able to umbrella other organizations and invite them in and try to provide a stronger continuum of partnership with other organizations in the area too. So I think adaptability, resilience, and all those things that are truly rural in nature are the reason why we're still here too.
Well, and you're one of the last standing regional organizations for Southwest Iowa. I mean, we used to have here in Iowa, we used to have a volunteer organization called the Southwest Iowa Coalition that helped about 13 to 18 counties, depending on how you count them, work towards that really did some pretty good policy work in its early years. And then, but yours, so I'm looking at the RC&D as one of the last standing regional organizations that has hope for our rural communities, because if you're not doing regional development these days, you are an incredible silo, and you're not taking advantage of other people's passions and what they can do. So you said you have that collaboration aspect of it, and can you go just a little bit further on that, because we teach collaborative leadership, and it's all about how people work together, not the projects done. So talk a little bit about that, of how you train your board, how you pick your board, how do you really instill that into a passion and a purpose of the RC&D.
Well, and I guess just kind of tagging on to that, because that's where I was going to go too, is just when you say collaboration, how far does that spread? Is it just within your county, or just, how far and who gets to play when you talk about collaboration?
Well, I think, so I am not your typical rural development person. I come from a sociological background. So, I that probably makes my ability to look at things a little bit differently. Right now, we have active projects in about 20 counties in Western Iowa, because there is not an RC&D to kind of lead that collaborative project. And a lot of our projects that we're involved with are defined certainly by county lines, but also by watershed lines, by geological lines. The Luss Hills and the Luss soil figures heavily into some of the projects that we work with. And so, our boundaries have gotten a little bit wavy. But how do we bring people together? I think that for me, and I think for my staff, we tend to be as inclusive as we can. So certainly working with local partners, residents, business owners, conservation staff, and also looking at our state partners. And we've worked really hard to make good relationships with our state agencies like DNR and Department of Ag, Iowa Economic Development, cultural fairs, because all of those things become important to the work that we're trying to do to improve our rural communities. And so, our job is really to kind of herd the cats. And it sounds kind of silly, but it really is just always keeping an eye about who else should be at the table, and whose voice is not being heard, and who should be, elevated or have a microphone in front of them to hear, or to have their story or their needs or their ideas shared on a broader scale. And so we are able to, and again, I think it's just sort of the magic mix of staff that work at Golden Hills right now, that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction, that we want to make sure that, our elected officials are not the only ones making decisions. The people that run the grocery store on our Main Street should also be involved. Our kids should be involved. And I think this is totally in line with what both of you are so passionate about, is really trying to build collective, collaborative, inclusion based decision making, and pulling in a multitude of resources to bring something to life.
Yeah, that's so important, because of the quantity of marginalized groups that we have anymore out there, and just kind of the makeup of rural America. I mean, I was born and raised here. I belong to make the decisions, and but it's really not a culture of inclusivity of new people. Though we want new people to move into our community, sometimes our culture, we want people to move into our community, look like us, think like us, more importantly, think like us, because we don't want any of those off the wall ideas, right?
Right.
And so that collaborative approach, and bringing that in and asking that question, who's not at the table, that is an extremely important question. And I'm so glad to hear that you asked that question for rural communities.
Well, I think, and this is a truism for a lot of rural communities. There's a lot of poverty in some of our small towns. There's a lot of wealth too, but there also is a lot of poverty, and that's because it's a less expensive place to live. And a lot of times you have generations of a family that live in a town. They're very rooted to the place. And so, when you have things like that, oftentimes those folks are not asked to come to a city council meeting. They're not asked to be on an advisory committee, and they've never had the opportunity to really kind of vision a future for themselves, because they just haven't been included. I think to really create prosperity for everyone and to really elevate our small towns, you have to do that. You have to bring everybody, and you have to bring all the ideas aboard. So, easier said than done, because I'm here to tell you, I live a mile south of Hastings, Iowa, which has a population of about 100, and it has chickens that roam down the main street, M16, which is the main street. And I like to refer to it as a Key West of Southwest Iowa because of the chickens. Anyways, we moved here. We moved here 16 years ago, and my husband is from Pittsburgh. He's not an Iowa boy. We're that sort of classic boomerang Iowan. I born in Iowa, went to the University of Iowa, traveled, lived in Cincinnati, lived in Pittsburgh, got married, brought my husband back, and we raised our kids on a historic farmstead south of Hastings, Iowa. Beautiful brick farmhouse. I wanted my kids to be able to play in the dirt and to raise chickens and to have that rural lifestyle that I treasured as a child. So no regrets. But I remember when we first moved there, someone delivered some cookies to us, one of our neighbors, and said, "Welcome to the neighborhood. In 20 years, you'll still be the new people." We're like, thank you. So we're coming up on 20 years. And I have to tell you, my husband served on the school board for 9 years. I was a Girl Scout leader. I was involved with PTO. We have given ourselves to the community, but you know what? We're still kind of new people. And there is this sort of idea that, a lot of our towns, because one of their strengths is that they have generations of the same families that are really doing good things. And I look at my neighboring town of Malvern, Iowa, which is doing amazing things. And there is a lot of people that are related to each other that are making it happen. But they're also really exploring this possibility of, if we're going to continue to be here, we have to be inclusive and inviting people in. And I think that's a hurdle that a lot of towns are going to have to figure out, because if we want kids to be enrolled in our school districts, keep our rural school districts alive, which are struggling, we have to be open to the idea that new people are going to come live in a space that we value and love as much as they could. So how do we do that? That's no small task. But part of that is, as somebody who's working for a nonprofit, someone comes up with a great idea, like, let's do this great new public art thing in our small town. Well, great. Michelle, come to our meeting. Let's talk about this. Like, okay, well, we can bring in Department of Cultural Affairs, and let's talk to our school art teacher. And hey, have we talked to the Latino Center in town? What do they think about this? Like, oh, well, we hadn't thought about that. Well, it's like, well, you have a significant part of the population that lives here and some really talented people. Let's invite them to the table too. And sometimes it's just a matter of just raising the question. There's no more magic than that. And people then will say, oh yeah, they'll step out of their privilege for a minute and say, oh yeah, we probably should ask those questions of everybody that lives here.
And that's exactly what we focus on, is that culture, because it does make a huge difference in whether or not people decide to stay. You stuck it out for 16 years and you still recognize that, yeah, maybe you aren't quite, you don't have grandparents buried in the cemetery. No. And that for rural America, that is a very heartfelt badge to wear, that, they, like the opening video that we use, their families put that stake in the ground. They came and they settled this area. And so it's kind of like we claim it. It is ours. And that is not serving us well anymore in terms of growth and population. And you're right. If we want our schools to remain viable and we want to have opportunities, then we definitely, that's why we work on culture with Rural Community Solutions, because it does matter whether or not you think of and then welcome and then say, oh, that's not even only a great idea, let's act on it. Not just hear it, but, oh, hey, that might be something that we actually could do that would benefit us.
Exactly.
So we need to take I want to take a little different direction, because you've been a woman leader in both the RC&D and other nonprofits all of your career. What kinds of changes, what kinds of transitions, what was it like? Were you stepping into kind of a male-dominated world as a woman when you first started? Share a little bit about that, will you please?
Well, I think so. When I worked for nonprofits that were primarily focused on women and children early on in my career, and so I probably didn't feel it as keenly as I did when I moved to the RC&D. Now, having said that, the director of the RC&D before me was a really strong woman, and so she kind of paved the way in a lot of ways for me to kind of step into this role. There was a history of a woman with strong opinions and strong ideas who got stuff done. So, I've tried my best to kind of fill her shoes in the last 7 years. So, What I will say is, working in economic development, rural development, conservation, it still tends to be a pretty male-dominated area, and that's because of a lot of reasons. But I think what I have found is that I bring a certain, I guess, the way I've been, my cultural experience, and also the way that I have been, socially conditioned, is I tend to be very collaborative in nature, inclusive, thoughtful. And that's not to say that people from another gender are not the same way, but I think sometimes it brings a fresh perspective when we're looking at projects, and I see that as a strength. But I will say that there's increasingly a lot of women that have elevated to positions of leadership in the nonprofit sector, and I think that, in speaking in very large brushstrokes, that idea of collaboration is really taking root and getting away from competing with one another, but really figuring out how we can collectively align to really solve social issues. And I think that's a strength that has come out of women in the nonprofit sector, and I hope I'm a part of that. But it's interesting. Nonprofit executive directors are a pretty isolated group anyhow. And when you do it in a rural area, you're even more isolated. You just don't have a lot of colleagues that are doing the same kind of work. And so, I'm always looking for mentors and people to share ideas. And I do my very best. And I worked for the YWCA of Greater Cincinnati for several years. And their motto was lift as you climb. And I still really subscribe to that idea. I feel that, as an effective leader, my first job is to be a servant to the people that I work for, and to my staff, and to really make sure that they are able to, achieve their personal goals, and to be able to do work in the most effective way possible. And I would say, that this last year with the pandemic, it has allowed me to kind of step back and because, we've been virtual, like a lot of people, to kind of, I couldn't closely manage folks in the same way. And that's okay, because what happened is I saw a tremendous amount of creativity and innovation come out of my colleagues here at Golden Hills, by just giving them an opportunity to have a life-work balance, and to think in creative ways, and to step out of sort of their traditional roles. And I think as I get older and more confident, that I'm willing to kind of, listen, instead of, ruling with an iron fist. I'm more open to say, tell me what you think we should do. And that's a skill that I really treasure. I hope to continue to develop it.
That's an amazing skill for anybody in management, or that handles people, has to develop. That's really great. So you have said that a lot of your staff is now working from home. Do you plan to bring them back in the office, or kind of what is the long-term plan on there?
Well, that's still evolving. So we have a staff of 8 at Golden Hills, and most of those staff are program directors or project coordinators that are working on specific project areas. So they have been able to transition to working remotely very well, and have continued to work on grant-funded projects and meet deliverables, and to continue to innovate. And I'm not sure that they're going to come back to the 8 to 5 grind in the office. And I'm not sure they should, to be honest. I think that they're a lot more effective. We cover a big area. So I have staff that live in Sydney. I have staff that live in Imogene. I have staff that live in Honey Creek. They're kind of scattered all over the place. So driving to Oakland just takes time away from them to do stuff that's creative and good. So I don't know that we're ever going to go back to that. And I'm getting to be okay with it. What I'm looking at is, we have this terrific asset of a building in Oakland, Iowa, which is really centrally located in Western Iowa. Is there an opportunity to bring in other people that can benefit from the office infrastructure that we have? Looking at hubbing, which I think is a trend, right, for rural areas. Having a hub,
like a co-working space.
Co-working space, or even right now we have one other nonprofit that works under our roof. We're exploring a partnership with another one. I think that, and what happens is you start cross-populating your ideas with each other, and it just creates like this magic, this great synergy. And I think that might be a really great opportunity for us. And I also think that's a great opportunity for small towns in general to think about, is how can how can you create workspaces or community spaces that can sort of create this synergy with different efforts to really create something that's better for the community at large.
Yeah, last week we had on a gentleman from Madeira, Portugal on there who has created, they're creating the island, the whole island as a digital nomad attraction. Of course, we here in Southwest Iowa, we don't have islands, we don't have mountains, we've got rolling hills, we've got great people on that, but still our communities can really capitalize upon this and create those spaces. But we have to be careful when we just say create space. We have to get our folks ready, our people ready to create the environment to where that space is utilized. Because I've been in this business for 30 years, and incubators have been popular, and opening up those coffee shops have been popular for home-based businesses, and it's been okay, and it's a nice project to do, but yet our people still are not open to attracting that type of individual. And so when we start to think like entrepreneurs, we'll start to attract those entrepreneurs. But we really have to start thinking like them and getting our people ready to build that cultural environment that's going to attract a digital nomad or somebody that wants to live in our community that's going to bring our job with them. And that is really, we're looking at that as the savior of rural America. How can we rebuild the population? So as you look in your crystal ball, there we go. What do you see for Southwest Iowa, and how can we capitalize upon this digital transformation that we are doing coming out of COVID, and really not look backwards of how we used to do things, but really look forwards on how we can change what we do to attract that new workforce?
Yeah, well, I'm being told that broadband is coming. It's coming. We finally have fiber in the last year here at our office in Oakland. Otherwise, we had a little receiver up on the building that popped off the co-op and binged off somewhere else. So, just in the last year, we have fiber at our office, which is fantastic. In my home in Hastings, we have a pole up on a hill that has a little receiver, and we can stream stuff. But I don't think we're there yet. But I know there's a lot of effort right now to bring broader access to internet connectivity throughout our rural areas. We're going to run into some issues with the less hills, because we have a lot of hollers and valleys and places where it's going to be hard to do some of that. But that's an issue. I also think we really, and I know there's a lot of work happening on increasing housing in our small towns, because I can tell you there is a demographic of sort of these, I'm going to say like older millennials to early Gen X people that are in that age group. Now, we always lament our children are leaving our rural communities. Well, you know what? They're going to leave. I have a 22-year-old daughter. She's not coming back to Hastings, Iowa. I don't expect her to. But I know that she was raised there, that, if she reaches a point where maybe she has children or she's ready to have a simpler life and a cheaper life, she might be enticed to come back. What we need to focus on are those people that are, parenting, that want the ability to not have to commute, to take away from their time with their kids, that want to have the reason I moved to Hastings with my husband is because we wanted our kids to go to a small school district where everybody knew them, and they were able to be in the band and try out for the play and also play football and be a cheerleader and do all of that. And you don't get that in an urban school setting. You get to be anything you want to be in a small school, because there's room for everybody to be anything. And that really appealed to us. I think that there is a population that is very interested in having that experience, especially post-pandemic. I think that there are people that are wanting to come from urban centers that are in that sort of, let's say 30 to 45 age group that want to be there. We just have to get things in place. And everything that you said about creating welcoming and inclusive communities, it's also about, the technology, and then having housing that is not just, the $250,000 houses, but also things that are diverse in price and that are humane and equitable, so we've got some work to do, but having those things in place, I know that there's a demand of wanting to relocate here, and People want to have that experience. So my crystal ball, what are the opportunities? I think, certainly if we can get those things figured out, I'm seeing towns, and you probably are too, the smaller towns, and I'm talking towns that are a population of well under 5,000, like maybe 1,500.
Right.
They're almost taking a Disney approach where they're figuring out what their niche is and what makes them special and what are the assets that they have that they can really kind of build on. And, I hate to talk about Malvern again, but it's 5 miles from my house. So Malvern has realized that the Wabash Trace goes through their town, and it's always been a tremendous draw. And they have really capitalized on it. And they've also had a number of people from that age group I just talked about move back home, who are artists, who are visionaries, who are entrepreneurs. And, they are doing amazing things. There's no empty storefronts in Malvern, Iowa. There's no houses to buy in Malvern right now. They're putting in a bunch of new housing lots, which is fantastic. But houses don't stay on the market very long in that town. And it's a short commute to Omaha if you work there. I think they have pretty good internet access in the community. And, other towns like Woodbine is another example that has really identified that they've got this rich history and this connection of the old Lincoln Highway and some terrific building stock. And, they're a Main Street community, and they have really created sort of this destination experience where people want to live there. So I think towns need to figure out, they need to be focused on their assets. They need to be, not thinking about their deficits, but working from a place of abundance, because every small town has a story to tell, and every small town, no matter how small, even Hastings, has something that is worth saving and cherishing and celebrating. And, it's just a matter of giving that power back to the community that lives there and helping them recognize it. It's kind of like, Dorothy realizing she always had the power to return home with the ruby slippers. She always had it. She just needed to click her heels and be reminded of it. So, it's kind of the same thing with our small towns too.
And that's so exciting to hear, because it's just I can feel my excitement growing that you're thinking along that philosophy, because that's exactly what rural America needs.
It is, and that's exactly what we do with Rural Community Solutions. So that works out great. Gosh, Michelle, we could just go on and talk for ages, but we are so grateful that you were able to join us today to put us in your busy schedule. So we'll have you back on the show again at some point in time. So if you'll stick with us for just a second, we'll be right back with you.
Well, one question I'd like to ask, if people are interested and they used to have an RC&D, but they want to get it started back up, or their RC&D might be struggling, or just any type of 501c3 that works in rural areas is struggling, how can they get a hold of you that you can transfer your expert advice?
I'm always willing to give advice. It might not always be good advice, but our website is goldenhillsrcd.org, and that would be a good place to land. That will kind of capture the multitude of projects that we're involved with, and also my contact information. And we are an entrepreneurial nonprofit, and so we are always looking for opportunities within our mission to help enhance quality of life in rural Western Iowa. So I'm always willing to talk to people that have an idea, have a need, to help connect the dots, and that's what makes me wake up in the morning. So
that is so exciting. Right. Oh my gosh, we're so grateful that you were here with us today for all that you have shared. Thanks so much, Michelle. We appreciate it a lot.
We'll be right with you here.
So we are grateful to Michelle Wodtke Franks, the Executive Director of Golden Hills RC&D here in Southwest Iowa, for all of her expertise, all of the path that she has taken, all that she's learned along the way, and how she's developed that into being a collaborative, collective leader who gets things done because she works with people.
And she talks about where she lives, and just as kind of a geography lesson for folks that aren't familiar with Southwest Iowa, where she lives is about a half an hour from Omaha, and she can probably get to the Omaha airport. I know I can get to the Omaha airport faster than anybody that lives on the west side of Omaha, because they have to drive through traffic. So if you're looking for the large metropolitan area, you can still choose a rural community, and you can have access as quick, if not quicker, into minutes going of how to get there. And you have malls, you've got the arts, you've got civic centers, you've got sports. In Omaha, there's the NCAA World Series that is going to be starting up again, I'm sure, this summer. So there's just a lot of activities that go on, but you don't have to live within the urban center. You can live in those communities that are family friendly and youth centered. So take advantage of that.
And often far more affordable than living in the metropolitan area. So if you'd like to have any conversation about what that might be like or what kind of recommendations, we sit in a great spot, just speaking for Southwest Iowa, because we have Des Moines, Council Bluffs, Omaha, and Kansas City within a very short drive time. And so there's lots of opportunity here to think about bringing your business, bringing your family, and creating a life here, just like Michelle and her husband and her family did. So we're going to go ahead and look toward tomorrow. Tomorrow, as we continue Women's History Month, we are going to enjoy a conversation with Maritza Coscarelli. She is a coach, a public speaker, public confidence coach. She is an entrepreneur. She's had her business for quite a while, and she's going to talk to us about what it's like to be a woman entrepreneur who helps other people become confident in their public speaking and addressing how their business projects to people.
So we're going to be going from the rolling Loess Hills of Southwest Iowa to the wonderful beaches of Florida tomorrow.
Yes, and so we're grateful today that you have joined us at Rural Community Solutions, where we help you design family-friendly, youth-centered places. We're here every Monday through Friday. We've switched now. It's back to 11:30 Central Daylight Time. We have YouTube and Facebook at Rural Community Solutions, or you can find us on our podcast on anchor.fm/FrankSpillers. Think like an entrepreneur, become a spark plug. That's what we want.
So we hope you have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.
We look forward to it. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye-bye.